5:30. Leslie, would you call this meeting to order?
Josh Altum, I believe, is going to be late. Gary Mitchell.
Here.
Linda Rhodes.
Here.
And Mayor Pro Tem Wandell.
Present.
All right, well, we're going to circle around back to the work session, make sure that Josh is here for that. We'll go into regular session. And first thing up is Visitor and Citizens Forum. Leslie, do we have anybody wishing to speak in just the regular Citizens Forum, not the public hearings?
I haven't received any requests.
All right, then we'll move on to that. We'll go from reports from the council, updates from City Council. Gary Mitchell, I know you were busy last week.
Oh, I was busy, but nothing really to update.
All right, Chad Wandell.
Well, he's not going to say it. I am. I'm just glad the sun's out.
Absolutely.
Props to Gary. I'm going to try to remember everybody. This is going to be crazy. I know without Gary Mitchell, Mark Fueling, Gerald Kern, Sarah and her group at Kennedal Senior Outreach, Lori and her outreaches, Jan Joplin, Tamika. Oh gosh, there's so many people I can't even, I knew I should have made a list. Please don't hate me if I forgot your name. Trust me, it's just I haven't slept like 10 hours in the whole week, so just getting back to normal. But thank you guys so much for all the help. Everybody came together like crazy and got a lot of stuff done in a very short amount of time. And mad props to everyone in our community, because that was Kennedale, and that's why I'm proud to live here, guys. Thank you.
All right, I agree 100%. Linda.
I just want to mention one thing as far as our transfer over to the City of Arlington Water Department. I know a lot of you have, when you got your bill, those of you that like to mail it or put it in the night drop, there was no envelope in there. And when I spoke with one of the representatives today on another issue, I asked her about that, and more or less, that's a service that they don't offer their own utility customers. It's a cost savings. And so whenever they contracted with us, that was not even, included with that. So my advice is just go to Dollar Tree, spend $1 on a box of envelopes, and it'll last you for probably about 2 or 3 years. So, and also, if anyone out there has a different mailing address, this was the issue that I had. I had a different mailing address for a secondary water account of mine, and I wanted it to be mailed at my home address. And through the transfer, somehow or another, that did not get transferred that way. So it was mailed to the vacant house. And so anyway, for those that may have a different mailing address, you may want to reach out to the City of Arlington Water Utility and just make sure that they have that correct mailing address on there for you. And that's all I have.
And that's updates for me. I'll just echo what Chad said. Props to Gary and Chad and all those people out there, Jan. And by the way, we should throw in our police department, our fire department, our library staff who are out there manning everything. And props to Chad G for opening up the junior high. George told me that Chad and his wife were actually out shoveling the snow by themselves so that people could get into the junior high gymnasium. So we thank Chad G tremendous amount for that. Updates from the city manager.
A couple of things, Mayor, that I want to mention, and I agree we've had quite an unusual week, and a lot of people did wonderful things, and we all appreciate that. We really had relatively few glitches with the transfer of the water that Linda mentioned. We've had a couple of problems. I think 2 customers were coded incorrectly and got unusually high bills for a construction fee of some kind, which is being corrected. That was an error, but as far as I know, it only occurred on two bills, and this is our first billing from Arlington. So all in all, that conversion has gone over pretty well so far, as far as I know. I did want to mention that with regard to trash collection, obviously some people have gone over 2 weeks without trash collection because of the weather. And the normal collection was supposed to start this week. And it has, although our collection in Kennedale is normally Wednesday and Saturday. And frankly, the volume of work that Waste Connections is having to do is throwing them behind. So there is a possibility and a probability that they will not make all of the routes in Kennedale tomorrow. And some of those may linger until Thursday and or even Friday. We've posted that up on our website and on social media so people are aware of it. They may be able to start some of it tomorrow as normal, but the likelihood that they'll finish tomorrow is slim. So we encourage people to continue to be patient. If they do, in fact, have to go into collections on Thursday and Friday for Kennedale, that probably will mean they'll cancel Saturday collection. So put everything out there. They're going to pick up everything when they do make the routes, recycling and everything, but some of the collection may sit out there until Thursday or Friday, and want people to be aware of that. Mayor, that's all I have.
All right, financial reports, Nikita?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The only thing I have is that just an update as of the end of January, we did spend all of our CARES funding, the $420,000 allocation that we received from the county. And we submitted our final report to the county as well. As far as I know, everything that we submitted has been accepted as far as our justifications and the different categories and things that we needed to purchase, various things, anything from a thermometer to gloves. You know, we have an entire list of everything that the city needed and the things that we were able to enhance as a result of COVID, especially like the work from home capabilities and things like that. So all of that money has been spent. We won't end up having to send any back. If we hear anything from the county in the next 30 days or so about any additional questions they have about what we spent, we will be sure to send council an update on that. And that's really all I have.
All right, so we don't have a consent agenda because our minutes aren't ready from our last meeting. So that brings us to our public hearings, which we have left open. And the first item is PZ 2103. Melissa, do you want to give us a background here? Well, not that kind of background. It's like yeah. Is Melissa talking? Is she on mute?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Everybody see the screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. So this case is regarding R.E. Watson and Associates, who has been in Kennedale for many, many years, since 1981. This is a company that manufactures glass products for construction. So things like shower doors, mirrors, and things like that. They have grown over those years, over the decades in Kennedale. You can see here kind of a summary of their business in Kennedale. They moved over to Tower Drive in 2004, and they have grown because of the growth in the DFW area and have outgrown their space. So over the past year or so, we have been in discussions with Mark Watson to try and help them find a space, or to look at spaces that he brought to us to see if those would work for a new expansion for their business. So here's the site, 731 East Kennedale Parkway. This is a parcel that fronts the parkway. It is, you'll notice, and just keep this in mind as we look at the zoning map, this is one complete parcel. So it's not divided into two parcels like a lot of these others are. It's actually one parcel here. And I say that because there's a bit of an unusual situation on the zoning on that, which is why we're here with you tonight. Here's an aerial. This development would be sandwiched between two other commercial developments along the parkway on this lot. This is a lot that was owned by the Middleton family for well over 60 years and has come up for sale. So this is the zoning map, and this is what I wanted to show you. The reason we're took this to Mr. Watson made the zoning request to the Planning and Zoning and Council is because the singular lot, I apologize, the singular lot has two different zonings on the same lot. That includes both C2 and R3 zoning. So that's pretty unusual. We would really never do that today, where you had one parcel with two different zonings. And so you have this R3 section of zoning that extends pretty far up and basically aligns with the overlay on the parkway. The future land use plan envisions this area as urban corridor. This would be a lot that fronts the corridor. So it would be part of that urban corridor and therefore is consistent with the land use plan or the future land use plan because it is one of a commercial use compatible with that urban corridor use. Something to point out, I know that when you see lines on this map, this is not aligned with the parcels. It's just a general idea showing that the Kennedale Parkway is this urban corridor. So here's a kind of pushed out aerial on the lot. As I mentioned, it would be situated here between these two commercial uses. The uses along the parkway, of course, are pretty much all commercial or industrial uses. This particular property backs onto Mansfield Cardinal Road, which is this road here. So it's a little bit of an unusual situation in that you have a collector street in Mansfield Cardinal behind these lots, which have a whole variety of uses. But all of the uses fronting the parkway are primarily commercial uses. And so here's the site here. This actually shows where R.E. Watson is currently. So they're looking at moving to this site, which is a little bit larger and allows them to construct a building of the size they need. This also shows you Mansfield Cardinal running behind the parkway. As I mentioned, you have a mix of commercial and residential. You have several neighborhoods there along Mansfield Cardinal that back onto Mansfield Cardinal. They have brick walls or wooden fences that back onto Mansfield Cardinal. And then on the other side of the street, you just have this mix of both commercial, industrial, and residential uses. So talking about the uses a little more, here's Mansfield Cardinal. Of course, this is the parkway. This is the site that we're talking about. And it's actually this site particularly. One of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit is kind of how far it does extend back, especially for the active part of the use in terms of vehicles and trucks and so forth. But this gives you an idea of the proximity of Kennedale Parkway and Mansfield Cardinal, which is, again, this is a collector street that collects traffic from Mansfield Cardinal and brings out to Kennedale Parkway. Here you see the neighborhoods along it, these back onto Mansfield Cardinal. And then along the other side, you have a mix of this commercial uses and industrial uses. This is a zoning map, but it pretty closely mirrors the land uses along this street. So looking at the commercial uses, it's a really wide variety, but there's some warehouse buildings, various uses. You have a school here. Here you have a nursing home with another commercial use across the street, another warehouse style building there on Mansfield Cardinal. And then you have the neighborhoods that back onto the street, onto Mansfield Cardinal with the brick walls here, wood fences. And in a lot of cases, you have the commercial uses across the street with the warehouse buildings with very little screening in most cases. And here's some more images of the neighborhood and where you have the commercial uses across the street on Mansfield Cardinal. So this is 2 lots down, just to kind of show you, sort of looking towards Kennedale Parkway. This is common where you have these commercial uses that back onto Mansfield Cardinal that are fronting Kennedale Parkway. This is actually 2 lots over from the site we're talking about tonight. Whoops. So this is the backside of the site along Mansfield Cardinal today. This is the site here with the tree line or bushes. This is the Brookstone neighborhood that backs onto that street. So this is what's proposed. It's a long warehouse style building with an office in the front. Here's the layout. This is Kennedale Parkway, and then Mansfield Cardinal behind. I'll talk about this a little more, but this went before the Board of Adjustment. And the reason for that is with the C2 that fronts Kennedale Parkway. This use is allowed in C2 zoning, but only special exception. This would be considering processing and packaging light, which is allowed in C2 zoning with a special exception. The other option is industrial zoning, which we did not recommend because of the heavy industrial uses that it allows, which would not have required a special exception. So the applicant applied for the special exception with the C2 zoning in order to provide a use and aesthetics that were more compatible with the area. And so one of those requirements was a minimum 70-foot setback on the rear here, as well as landscaping on the rear that would be 8 foot at planting and 15 foot tall once it's fully grown, minimum. Additionally, the Board of Adjustment required that landscaping be placed along this edge on the north side because there is a home next door. So this landscaping would be extended to this northern edge up to the property line of that home, which is approximately here. The office use, as I mentioned, would be in the front with some head-in parking. There was some questions at Planning and Zoning about the activities and where they would primarily be, where trucks would be. Of course, there's plenty of trucks along Kennedale Parkway. And in this case, I think Mr. Watson's here. He can talk a little more about that. But the loading and unloading for larger trucks that unload materials would come in here. They would back into this dock. I believe these 3 bays here would be used for that towards the front, and then come back out to the parkway. The rear dock doors would be used for smaller trucks, just standard trucks, not the larger, big commercial trucks, for picking up supplies. So one thing to point out too is the part of what they're looking at using is this lot as well, but this is not under consideration tonight because it's already C2 zoned, but this would be the employee parking. So I wanted to kind of show you a little bit of about the scale of this, kind of going back to this map and how this relates to Mansfield Cardinal as well. So this is roughly, I did some rough measurements, and this is roughly how this would lay out on the site. And then you have these are the 2 commercial uses on either side, and you can see how far back those uses extend. So one of the things I looked at was those dock doors and how far back they extend. Again, the larger trucks would come in here and exit out the parkway. The smaller standard trucks would come up to these dock doors, which approximately align with this black line and end here. And so one of the things we were looking at is that that activity pretty much ends approximately where the activity on these other uses adjacent are. And that's this storage building here, and this building that I showed you earlier. It's called PU Tech Spoilers. And then this is the tall screening that you would see, the landscape screening that would be 15 feet tall, that would be along Mansfield Cardinal and along this lot here. So these are some images of what they're proposing. One main difference is that one of the requirements for the special exception is 80% brick. So the front facade would be more brick or stone than you see here. And here's some examples of that material that they would use and some of the architectural elements that would be required for the as part of the special exception conditions. So these are some of the examples of landscaping that they would be doing around the property, on the parkway, as well as Mansfield Cardinal. Specifically, Mansfield Cardinal, as I mentioned, would have the taller screening, something akin to something like this, but taller, up to 15 feet tall, as I mentioned, at maturity, as well as an 8-foot fence. So importantly, there would be no traffic in or out of Mansfield Cardinal at all. One question that came up at planning and zoning, and I did not have an elevation map. I didn't know that would come up. One of the residents mentioned that her lot, which backs on to Mansfield Cardinal in this cul-de-sac, which is here, and there's a brick wall along here, and these are backyards, that her lot was quite a bit higher and that she would be able to see over the screening. So went ahead, and I didn't have the information when that question came up at P&Z, but went ahead and pulled it. So this area at Brookstone is 682, and the lot 731 East Kendall Parkway is 680. So you really wouldn't be able to see over that screening. It's relatively flat. And then it actually goes down as you go towards the parkway. So this is a list of the special exceptions. The BOA unanimously approved the special exception with these conditions. Of course, the C2 zoning is one of those conditions. The office used to be located fronting the parkway, so you don't have the warehouse fronting the parkway. The front facing facade will incorporate fenestration, meaning windows, doors every 15 feet, an overhang awning with stone or brick columns, and at least 80% brick or stone. And then the parking lot would have a screening of 3 to 4 feet tall. They've talked about putting in a taller fence, and which would be allowed as long as it's transparent, with 3 to 4 foot solid screening to screen the bumpers. And then these are the conditions relating to Mansfield Cardinal. So the rear of the site fronting Mansfield Cardinal will not have vehicular access. A 6 to 8 foot tall wrought iron fence would be required with 8-foot plantings. These would be evergreen with that created a solid screening that would grow up to 15 feet tall, or at least 15 feet tall at maturity, as well as that north side of the property that is adjacent to 712, which is next door. The landscaping shall be maintained, any plants that die replaced, and then a minimum rear setback would be 70 feet away from Mansfield Cardinal. And then actually, I think I put that in twice. So that's all I have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let's hold off. You said Mr. Watson is here?
I believe I saw him come in, yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, Mr. Watson, would you like to add anything to this presentation?
You know, our scope of work is relatively clean. What we do is we buy mirrors and glass products and moldings and aluminum extrusions, and we make framed mirrors and cut and polish mirrors. And we also make all kinds of shower doors, frameless, framed, and semi-frameless shower doors, which we install in multifamily projects around Texas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth area. Our scope is relatively clean. We don't make dust. We don't make. We fabricate. What we do is fabricate mirrors and shower doors. We're really not considered industrial. We're much similar to a glass shop, except we're a big glass shop because we go after big jobs. The reason we want to stay in Kennedale is, you know, Dad started the business in 1981. I was his first employee in 1982. And it just feels like home. Dad retired in 99. So we were hoping to stay, and actually been looking for property for quite some time. And there's just not a lot of property that's available. I've talked to Melissa and George several times about lots on Kennedale Parkway, and there's just not many. So when this came up for sale, it seemed like a good fit. And I took it to George and Melissa and asked them, what they thought. And they thought, well, we could put it to the city council and see, if they would approve it. So, it's going to be quite an expensive warehouse. It would be, bring in good tax revenue. We currently have 60, since Melissa put that together, we currently have 62 employees. And we actually have 2 more that will be starting next week. We're gonna build a warehouse wherever we build it that we're proud of. It's going to be nice. We've done very well. We've got the funding in place. We're going to build something we're going to be proud of, and I think Kennedale would be proud of.
All right, well, thank you. We have the public hearing open. Leslie, start giving me the names of the people that spoke, that are wanting to speak at the public hearing. Remember, you have about 3 minutes. And get your information out there. That way, when we bring back Melissa or the developer, they can respond to whatever questions that you might have.
I haven't had anyone sign up yet. If anyone wishes to speak, if you could indicate as much by raising your hand through the app or sending me a message.
Okay, there's one. I see Chance Wells. So we'll go to Chance. You got about 3 minutes. Be my guest. Speak your piece.
Yes, sir. So I'm a resident of Mansfield Cardinal, and I know that it was pointed out earlier that down by where it was a school and you have the Pecan Manor and everything, and it's commercial, that's a very small stretch, and past that school or church all the way down to Little Road on Mansfield Cardinal is residential. And then in the last couple years, there have been either there was a house towards Little Road on Mansfield Cardinal that was renovated. there was 3 new home builds, and I'm concerned about my property value going down because there's going to be a big commercial property that, although it may be covered, it's still taken away from the possibility of it's a large property. There could be a house built there, and bottom line, I'm worried about traffic. I'm worried about the value of my home going down.
All right. Thank you, Chance. Leslie, do we have anybody else?
Chance, could you give me your address for the minutes, please?
704 Cardinal.
Thank you. Rocky Gilly has submitted a question that he wanted me to ask you, Mayor. If the zoning of C2 is granted, what would prevent a future owner from using Mansfield Cardinal as ingress egress?
Well, Melissa, I think we'll come to that. Rocky, I'll get to that question as soon as we finish. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, prevented by the ordinance itself that does not allow them to do that. They'd actually have to come to the council and ask for that egress because the BOA, if I'm not mistaken, the exception was no access on Mansfield Cardinal by law. So well, I'll have her address that again, Rocky, here shortly. Anybody else, Leslie?
I haven't received any messages. Does anyone else want? I don't see anyone else.
All right, well, then I will close the public hearing. And then Melissa response, and then questions from council to Melissa and the developer.
Well, I think you answered it. This zoning would be subject to the special exception. If the zoning was approved, then the special exception would go with the zoning along with all of those conditions, one of which would allow no access at all from Mansfield Cardinal, as well as require an 8-foot tall fence, and of course the screening.
All right, so let's start asking some questions of Melissa. We'll start off with Josh. Questions?
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. Long day. The first question I want to know is how come none of the letters that the homeowners around there submitted in opposition was not presented?
I'm sorry, it should have been included in your packet. I think we had 2.
Yeah. I didn't-
Guys, it was in the P and Z packet. We had 2 that were in the P and Z packet that were in opposition.
Okay. I didn't see those. I did sit in on both of those meetings. I sat in on the BOA and the P and Z. And the BOA, it wasn't unanimous, and the P and Z turned it down. I look at it this way, I'm not in favor of this because, you know, like I said before, we appoint these board members for a reason, and we have to trust their judgment, and their judgment was to turn it down. So in my mind, I think we should stick by that. On the other hand, of course, I live back there. The big thing is home values. Mr. Chance Wells said it, you know, there's 3 homes that were built right there. One of them's actually chick or urban properties that's trying to sell a home right now that they just built for $500,000. And they're gonna have a hard time selling it. You keep saying that these properties are unique, but if you look at it from an aerial view, you can see there's almost a straight line all the way down to where it's commercial on the Kennedale Parkway side and residential on the Mansfield Cardinal side, almost split in half. Is there a way that I can share my screen? Can y'all see this?
Yes.
Okay. So one thing I was going to show you was when you do this aerial, I drew a line here because you can see from the aerial, it's almost perfect the way that property is divided, residential and commercial on one side. You mentioned that his warehouse will be 50 yards off Mansfield Cardinal. This warehouse that's back here now is over 125 feet from Mansfield Cardinal, and look how big you can see it. Here's one of the brand new homes that was just built right there.
Josh, just for a correction, not 100, I think it's going to be 70 feet.
Okay. Well, like I said, that one's 125 feet, and you can see it. Here's one of the brand new homes we're trying to sell for $500,000. Chick Properties or urban development. And back over here, if you can see my mouse, you know, you said, well, there's a dilapidated piece of property there. Well, there was also, like Chance said, there's another dilapidated piece of property that they spent almost $500,000 renovating that home. That's beautiful. So, you know, let me close this out here. So one thing that Mr. Watson had mentioned was that he looked at some land down by Mansfield. And when he went down there, he was like, man, he goes, if y'all saw what I was looking at, talking about the junkyards, y'all wouldn't want to move down there either. Well, that's the same way these property owners are going to feel trying to buy these new homes here when they see that big metal warehouse. Because you know, daggone well, no matter how much screening you put, you're going to see a metal building. It's just plain and simple. And so I just don't think it falls in line with our master plan. I agree that along Kennedale Parkway needs to be commercial. That's spot on. But I don't think that it needs to run into where Mansfield Cardinal is, because there's so many nice homes and because if you think about it, there's 3 homes there. Say their value goes down 20,000. And then you got homes in Brookstone, their value goes down 20,000. That's almost 120 something thousand dollars that you're going to lose in the value of our homes just right there. So unfortunately, that's just how I feel. So.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Linda, any questions?
Yes. Were there any other concerns that was brought out at the P&Z meeting since it was denied? Other than what we're hearing right now, were there any other concerns that was brought out? That's one of my questions.
Yes.
That's for Melissa Daly to answer.
Yes.
There were really 2 primary concerns, I think, in general: commercial backing onto residential. which is a bit challenging because of course you have a city of 6 square miles and Kennedale Parkway running through it. So somebody's going to back onto it, even if it's the house behind it. But that was definitely, I think, the overriding concern. And then the second, I think, thing that was brought up was the elevation and the statement that Brickstone was quite a bit higher.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question is, just to clarify so that everyone will know, when BOA grants a special exception, does that go with the property or does that go with what's there right now?
It goes with that specific property.
Okay, so if that were to sell, then that would be zone C2 if this goes through, and the new owner, then they could technically do what they wanted as far as in, another entranceway on Cardinal Road.
They could not. It goes with the property, not.
Oh, okay, I
Watson and
understand.
Associates.
Okay, so it stays with the property from now on.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But to clarify, if what y'all need to understand, we spent a lot of time talking about this particular use that's going to come in. Excuse me. They may not come. So if you rezone it C2, any use permitted in C2 could come. So I don't know if your ordinances. I'm not familiar with ingress and egress requirements. But that's something I want to remind y'all. This is technically a straight zoning case. So we have a potential user chomping at the bit to get there, but you got to expect that this will be C2 forever or until it's changed. And any permitted use that's allowed in C2 could eventually go there.
Okay. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
All right, that'll bring us over to Gary Mitchell.
Well, I listened to the P&Z meeting as well, and I heard Mr. Watson say that if this deal didn't work out, that he would be leaving Kennedale. He's going to try to build somewhere else. And I definitely hate to see him leave. And then the one thing that just really keeps sticking out of my mind, because I too am for you residential people back there. I mean, the last thing we want to do is hurt your property values in a decision that we make. But kind of like what Melissa just touched on is somebody's going to build there. So say this front part is commercial and somebody builds a commercial there. We say we don't approve this and somebody builds there. Then somebody is going to buy that lot and build a house there, and their house is going to back up to it. So at some point in time, someone else is going to face the same dilemma, and chances are they're going to do it because just all through that, people have the residential on one side and commercial on the other side. So it's a decision that we have to make, and it's a tough one. It's not easy. Whether we want to lose his business, we just have to make a great, as best decision as we can with the information that we have. Do we want to lose his business, or is the next person going to be the one that has to build behind commercial, because that's what's going to happen eventually? So no real questions for me.
All right, Chad.
All right, I got a few. So as far as Mansfield Cardinal sits right now, it's one lane, one side, and there's obviously more right of way there. Do we have any future right of way needs that would impact this area, or is all the right of way we ever need for this strip of road there now?
That's probably a Larry question.
I believe we have the right of way we need for the structures that are already in place for that area. Future needs would probably be maybe the Little Road or the Parkway, but not Mansfield Cardinal at this point.
Okay, and that bounced me actually. My second question was, do we have right-of-way needs on the parkway that would impact this and change potential build lines, pushing it back or making them closer than they are now?
I don't think the city does, but I do not know what TxDOT has in mind.
Okay. I see some potential pitfalls with this, because if I'm looking at the plat map correctly, a little house that's in the top corner actually has a strip of property that runs all the way back to the parkway, creating a barrier between their parking lot and this new warehouse structure. So technically, when all these people go park and they walk across that piece of property to go to work, they're trespassing. I don't know. The negotiator in me goes, is there not a way to do a land swap to get the land all the way, trade some for that roadway? So maybe you can still etch out a lot up at the top and give more of the commercial room at the bottom, just make a fatter building. But I digress. I don't know. This one's a little weird. Let's see what else. I wrote a bunch of notes. I guess in particular, I'm not a fan of the screening on Kennedale Parkway. One of the problems we're already running in with a lot of the screening scenarios we're hitting is it makes it really easy for thieves to just duck down and hide. So I'm not a big fan of that. So maybe in the future, something we talk about is easing fencing restrictions on our parkway, because it just, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It basically sends the message of keep out rather than come shop with us. And then, is this a retail sales environment or is this a wholesale environment?
It's wholesale.
Okay.
I mean, we have some, I would say the retail customers are probably maybe 20 a year, but we don't go after that market. Our market is new construction, new large, high rises, multifamily projects, assisted living, student housing. We go to the jobs. Yeah, people don't typically come to us to buy materials. We do have other glass shops from the area, Dallas-Fort Worth area, that will come and pick up mirror doors. We make all kinds of mirror sliding closet doors as well.
Okay.
But we don't really go after the retail market.
And then what is the estimated height of this building going to be? Is it a 2-story structure or?
No, it's 20-foot sidewalls.
Okay.
Yep, 20-foot sidewalls, and we wanted to do 100-foot wide, but we could only get 84-foot wide on there with the fire lane requirements. But the original plan was to do 16-foot sidewalls and 100-foot wide. Now we're doing 20-foot sidewalls and 84-foot wide. And to answer, if you want me to, on the parking lot issue, that will actually be fenced off completely, and our employees will actually have to come up to the sidewalk, and cross their 30-foot easement area on the sidewalk onto our property. So they would have to jump a fence to get over on. Both sides are going to be fenced off. And I tried to negotiate to buy that property for the same land value that I'm trying to buy this 4.87 acres. That other property, I believe, is 0.85 acres. And they wanted over twice as much per acre. It was about $230,000 an acre is what they were wanting. And that just throws my budget completely.
Yeah.
I can't do it. It's not, it blows the budget. So, and I tried to do a land swap. I actually offered them more property towards the back, and let them have all of Mansfield Cardinal, and then I would have all mine to the front. But they didn't. They wanted to sell their property, for what they wanted. Case closed. So that's just not an option for me.
That's unfortunate.
It really was.
Any other questions?
Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, well then I'll entertain a motion on case PZ 2103. Josh?
I'll entertain a motion to deny it.
All right, do I have a second? Do I have a second? All right, then motion fails for the lack of a second. Do I have another motion?
I'll make a motion to approve PZ 21-03 as written.
Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
All right. I have a motion and a second for approval. Leslie, would you please call the roll?
Josh Altum,
Nay.
Gary Mitchell,
Yes.
Linda Rhodes,
Yay.
and Mayor Pro Tem Wendell.
Affirmative.
The motion passes 3-1. So that brings us to our next case, case PZ 2104, to conduct a public hearing and consider a request by Steve Smitherman for a replat. I think what we're doing here, Melissa, is we're combining two plats into one so they can build a house. Is that correct?
That is correct. The owner wishes to build a large house on the two properties. Here are the two sites. This would normally be a minor plat, but because this is a subdivision that was divided and platted previously, it comes to P&Z and council. So these are the two lots. Is a bit of an odd shaped lot along North Road, kind of triangular. So they basically want to do a larger house. There is a house on the side that presumably will be torn down with a larger house that that will meet the Old Town standards, which is important, I think. So here's the Old Town you can see in the brown. This is Old Town 1 zoning, which allows for single family. So it would be these two lots. There is a variety of lot sizes. I think here you have a very large lot across the street. And then as you can see, various size lots in Old Town. So we do think this would be compatible with the neighborhood for this single family home to be built on the larger lot. Here's the two lots here with this vacant lot and then this lot with the home on it, which like I said, I believe they'll be tearing down to build a larger home. They've actually submitted plans for us to look at the house design, which fits the Old Town standards. So staff recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, we're still in a public hearing. Do we have the applicant here? If not, Leslie, we're in the public hearing. Has anybody signed up on this? And this replat, I'm assuming, Melissa, meets all the subdivision requirements.
Yes, sir, it does.
Anybody, Leslie?
Speak? I haven't gotten any messages regarding wishing to speak on this, so.
I'll close the public hearing. Any questions for Melissa on this replat? If not, then I will entertain a motion on case PZ 21-04.
I'd like to make a motion to approve PZ 21-04.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? If not, Leslie, would you please call the roll?
Josh Altum,
Yay.
Gary Mitchell,
Yes.
Linda Rhodes,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wendell.
Affirmative.
All right, so that's going to bring us back to a work session. I have to attend a private matter. So Chad, you will be taking over the work session on the capital projects. I'm already very familiar with the capital projects. George and Larry will have a presentation for you. All right, Chad?
Sounds good.
All yours.
Well, on that note, I'm just going to turn the meeting over to George and he can walk us through our work session item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. This is a work session for the purpose of trying to represent some issues with regard to our capital projects that most of the council members have seen before. There are some nuances with regard to your consideration, one being that the county has announced that they're going to call a bond election for November. And you'll remember that a year or so ago, the council had discussion about the potential or the interest in calling a local bond election for purposes primarily of considering public safety facilities that need to be constructed. So what we thought we would do today is just go through the essence of what those capital projects are that have been in front of you for a number of months now. Lakita is going to go through those and point out some changes in the dollar and the cost of those that's gone up since we talked about it last. So there've been some minor changes, but also talk about what our recommendations at the staff level would be to you with regard to what projects to submit to the county to include on the county-wide transportation bond election in November, and try to get a sense and some direction from council of whether or not you want to consider a local bond election, and to kind of reinforce or to reconsider, at least review the direction we've already gotten from the council with regard to the projects that we might want to give priority to for the $14 million worth of COs that could be issued without any kind of a tax rate increase. So Mayor, with your indulgence and permission, I'd like to ask Lakita to go through that presentation. We'll certainly answer any questions, and toward the end of the presentation, we have some recommendations for you to consider and hopefully give us some direction either now or at the meeting in March. And I think Lakita will point out that the city council is going to need to pass a resolution with regard to the county bond election so that we have the city council's formal approval to submit projects for that. So with that, I'd like to ask Lakita if she would go through this presentation.
Sure. Mayor Pro Tem and Council, as George has pointed out, this was originally presented to you, I think around this time last year, maybe March of last year, when we presented you with an original list. And so we'll reference that original list as well as some updates as we move through the presentation. So goals for today, we're going to look at the list again, kind of refresh your memory on that. Look at what's needed for each particular projects, especially the street projects that will need design, right of way, and construction. We'll look at the timing and sequencing of each of these funding options, each of these three funding options that we're going to be talking about tonight. And those three options that we're looking at, or funding sources that we're looking at, are the county bond election, a local GO bond election of our own, and the 14 million COs that were approved with the passing of the budget. So this first sheet, it looks familiar to you, hopefully. It's the original capital projects list that we compiled, and it is a very comprehensive, if you remember, it was a very long list, a very comprehensive list of various types of projects that we have and needs that we have within the city. And it involved everything from what you see here: parks and rec, streets, public safety, library improvements, and some storm and stormwater projects as well. So if you can recall, the last time that we presented this list, we had a total of over $90 million worth of capital needs. Some of them were more, of course, immediate needs than others, but this is the list that we're kind of referencing, and this is the list that we continually update as we get new quotes and pricing information from our engineers. So here is a list of kind of how those projects are categorized. Like I said, originally we presented about $90 million worth, and now with some new pricing information that we've gotten, the total has gone to $121 million. And I'll kind of point out to you which ones we received updated pricing information for. But approximately 94 million worth of street projects we have on there, 4 million worth of parks and recs, water, wastewater, erosion, 7.6 million, library improvements, approximately 1.3 million, and public safety, 14.6. So potential funding mechanisms. So we know that we kind of got to look at the sequencing and the timing here. One thing that we need to do is figure out what particular projects we want to submit for the county transportation bond. So we're going to look at that. That is going to take place on their November 2nd, 2021 bond. So there are various milestones that we'll have to hit before then, as far as applying and having our recommendations to go through the board and all of that. So we'll visit that in just a second. The next category is our own local election. So these will be general obligation bonds, and we have various projects that we could submit. That's going to just depend on, you know, the council's consideration, priority, and basically anything that's outside of that 14 million of COs, we can look at putting on a GO issuance, depending on, you know, how much we're willing to tolerate as far as a potential tax rate increase. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And of course, the 14 million COs, we presented that to you all, I believe, initially back in October. We're good to go with that. We're gonna plan on getting the initial drawdown of that. We plan on getting that in August. So the plan was to split that up into 2 issuances, one in 2021 and one in 2024. So we plan to get the initial 6 million of that in 2021. So here are top 7 projects that we are looking at that may be potentials for submission for the county bond program. And on the far right, you'll see the totals for each one of those. Now, some of the pricing has increased since we last spoke about it. Let's see which one. So yeah, Valley Lane pricing is new pricing, Little Road, New Hope Road, the right-of-way and construction of those 2 lanes, and the Kennedale sublet realignment. Those are, we've already received new pricing on those, but these are kind of some of the top priority projects we thought that you may want to consider as far as putting on the county bond election. And then what's not approved, we can still pull those out and hopefully supplement with the 14 million. So that will be the plan, to see what we want to do with the county first. What could we get out of them? Because we know with whatever we get out of them, we have to put up a 50% match. And then whatever we don't get, we go to the 14 million that we can get on our own without a tax rate increase. And then after that, we decide what we want to put on our own local GO election. Okay, so these are just kind of and Larry he can talk much more about this than I can, but we wanted to pull out some kind of highlights about the program and what this program is all about. Some of you already know because you've been through this prior, but the projects do require a 50% match from the city. They do prioritize shovel-ready projects over projects that cannot begin within the next 5 years or so. Applications are due by April 16th. And so we will probably need to discuss this again at our March meeting, or maybe even call a special meeting at some point to do a resolution as to what our final decisions are and what we actually want to put on that ballot. Then, just some other things. The evaluation committee will go through a process of establishing evaluation criteria. They will keep us updated on that. Each commissioner has 15 million to spend at their discretion. Countywide, I believe there are 4 cities or 5 cities that participate with us. Grand Prairie, I think, Pantego, Down Worthington Gardens. So they'll go through and, I don't want to say compete, but we're trying to do whatever we can to be on the radar so that we can get as much here in Kennedale out of that as we possibly can. So here's your timeline for the program. And as we stated, we would want to start the conversation tonight, hopefully carry it forward, make some final decisions about what we want to submit to the county, keeping in mind that if there are projects that we don't submit for the county bond program and we decide to put it on our own local election, if the voters turn those projects down, we cannot spend any bond money on those programs for 3 years. So we're basically, we can't do anything with those. If we put it on our own bond election, we can't do anything with it, with any debt issuance for 3 years. But this kind of starts us right here and gives us our timeline of what we need to do as far as getting that into the county. So as you can see, the commissioner's court approval is going to happen sometime in the August, September timeframe, and the actual election itself will be on November 2nd. So these are some potential projects that we've discussed before that were on the initial list that we sent out. We were looking at some library improvements, some improvements to the building itself, the public safety facility for police and fire. We put additional public safety because the quote that we received was for basically the building. And so we would probably need to look at other things as far as, a training facility, parking, and, evidence storage facility, things like that. And probably the land as well, because I'm not sure if that $9 million included the land. I don't believe it did. So additional public safety, 3 million there. And then 1.6 million for Parks and Rec. And this was things like, I think we talked about a railroad themed park, special lighting, scoreboards for sports events and things like that, new grass on the grounds for sports, and something to make everything a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. All right, so the debt capacity for our general fund, again, the 14 million that we know we can get without a tax increase. As I stated before, the 6 million scheduled for August of 2021. Additional debt will require a tax increase. So whatever we do outside of the county bond and the 14 million will go on a GO bond, which will require a tax rate increase. How much would depend on what is decided to go on it. We just pulled out and said, okay, well, if we do a 15 million GO issuance, that's going to approximately raise the INS tax rate by 7 cents. So that just gives you an idea of what we would be looking at. And of course, an increase in the INS tax rate will subsequently be a total tax rate increase. And, this increase is based off of, minimal growth. We were very conservative with this. We do expect more growth, but we could have a growth year like we did in this prior year where we only got 3%, and we were, prior year before that, we were getting 6% and 7%. So we want to be very conservative in this type of estimate. So 7 cents for a 15 million GO issuance. Okay, so you may be wondering, well, what about the water projects? Because there are some items on the list that will be considered water type projects, and it's not recommended to put water debt on a GO bond. And so that those will require that the water fund do their own, revenue bonds. And we certainly have the debt capacity to do that. We are looking pretty good on our fund balance. I think we're about at 40% of our fund balance in the water sewer fund. We do have a lot of outstanding capital. I think probably with the transition with Arlington and trying to get online with their water and all of that, we are yet to know really what those total costs are going to be. But the way that it looks now, we do have a pretty healthy water fund balance. And when we go to our financial advisors and talk to them about the debt capacity in the water fund, the first thing they look at is the fund balance in the upcoming capital requirements. Right now, the way that it looks, we do have room for more debt. So if the council decides that 3 or 4 projects that you want to include with the CO issuance or GO issuance, if those require water capital, we can actually attach a $2 to $4 million issuance onto the 14 million. So for example, the first section of the 14 million, we're going to get issued in August of 2021. And so what we can do is we can attach another 3 million to that and just have it labeled as water debt. And that's basically what a lot of cities do at this point, because what it does is it prevents you from having to pay like debt issuance fees twice. We could just put it all together with this one issuance that we know we're going to do anyway. So I just wanted to put that out there. If there are water projects that are identified or that are going to be needed in order to make these other projects happen, we do have some debt capacity. I don't want to throw out any hard numbers out there. We will have to go back and talk with our financial advisor, but I'm going to be safe to say we have at least $4 million that we probably can attach to this next issuance that we're going to do in August. So that's something to consider. So our recommendations, we showed, I believe back on slide 6, a total list of 7 projects. Those would be like way over what we could possibly submit because they do require some match for the submittal. But we were thinking that these may be some of the top 4 projects that we want to submit. And so these may actually be ones that we may get approved. And these projects we feel like are a priority at this point. A few of these have had some pricing increases. I know for sure the Little School Road extension was one that increased significantly. Kennedale sub realignment as well. These are $20 million worth of projects, but if you have questions about what impact or positive impact they will have, I'm sure you guys already know that, but Larry could probably jump in there if you have any questions about that. Next slide. So we've been talking about a public safety facility for some time, and of course, the only way we could do that would be through a local bond election. So if we wanted to do a local bond election of our own in November, for example, the 12 million, you add the 9 million for the facility plus the 3 million for the land and the other things that would be needed for it, you're looking at about 12 million on a GO local election. And, as stated before, if you do 15 million, that's going to be 7 cents. So just to give you an idea, there is no limit to what you can put on your local GO bond election. You can, whatever the council decides, projects you want to put additional projects or you want to put more street projects or, you know, things like that, we can certainly do that. Just something to consider. Yeah, so again, yeah, this would be, go back one, Leslie. That would be, yeah, the voter approved election of our own. And then of course, you keep in mind that if you put it on there and they don't approve it, the voters don't approve it, you cannot do those projects for the next 3 years using any type of debt issuance. So this list is the one that we did provide last March. As I stated, some of these numbers have been updated significantly. Let me point those out to you real quickly. The ones that increased were the Valley Lane, the Little Road extension from Kennedale Parkway to New Hope Road, right-of-way and reconstruction of 2 lanes, and the Kennedale Sublette Road realignment. So when we initially talked to you last year about these projects, these were the quotes that we had at the time, and they made up just about the 14 million, a little bit over what we could get with our own COs. So now that we are actually pulling some of these projects out and considering submitting them to the county, these numbers are going to be a little bit more fluid. So Leslie, will you go back to slide 6 real quick? So on this one, and I can send this presentation to you all as well. On this one, you'll see that the totals on some of these projects are quite more than what they were when we originally submitted. For example, New Hope Road, I mean, that total has gone up to 28 million. But again, you know, they're going to be fluid based on what we decide to cover with the 14 million, what we decide to put on the county bond. Okay, Leslie, go back to the other one. Okay. So this evening, we were just kind of wanting some, next slide. Yeah, just some direction as to what you think about the 4 projects that we have put as a priority and that council may want to consider submitting for the transportation bond. Also, what the council may want to consider putting on our own local GO bond, whether you want to do the public safety building, add something to that, as well as the plans for the 14 million. We definitely do need a little bit more direction about I believe we talked to you during budget time about purchasing a fire engine and an ambulance. The fire chief did discuss that we have a great need for that. And, you know, it could be at our disadvantage if we don't look at getting that replaced. We've looked at some pricing and everything for that, and we're probably going to be looking at about $1.2 million if we're going to get the fire engine and the ambulance. And those type of purchases do require quite a bit of planning, and the order time itself could take up to 6 months. And so if that was something that the council still wanted to move forward with, we would just kind of need the approval on that so that we know that that will come off of the initial 6 million that we're going to be getting in August. And with that, George, if I missed anything, let me know.
Well, let me just reemphasize a little bit about the ambulance and the fire truck. The 14 million that's available to issue without a tax rate increase, those projects listed there did not include those. And what council had talked about was giving those a priority. And as Lakita said, the cost on those is probably going to be in the $1 million, $1.1 million range. And the time frame to get those two pieces of equipment, which we need quite badly, it would take, and James can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would take up to 8 months once we place an order for an ambulance to get the ambulance delivered. It would take probably a year or more to get the fire truck delivered. So we're not going to get those delivered in the current fiscal year, but we need the council's direction on whether or not those two pieces of apparatus are still a high enough priority that we can proceed with the planning and getting ready to place those orders as soon as possible and make the commitment for that first $1 million or so out of that $6 million issue that'll be done in August. So if the council's changed their mind for any reason, if you have questions about that, James has been pricing, reviewing, looking at the manufacturers and trying to determine how we would spec those two pieces of equipment out. But if we're going to make those purchases and expect to get them delivered in next fiscal year, we need to proceed with that. So we're going to need some direction from council pretty quickly on that as a priority. And then on the countywide bond election, we have no way of knowing today which of those projects, if any of them, would actually make the cut with the committee that the county will appoint. Obviously, we hope we'll get a substantial amount of funding for projects in Kennedale. And if in fact they were to say, we love Kennedale and we're going to fund all of those that you're submitting there, then we'd have to make some decisions on whether or not we'd have the ability to fund the local share of it or not. But right now, we need to be working toward that April 16th date of getting the projects submitted to the county, including all of the information they want about those projects so they can make a good decision on whether to include them in their bond election or not. And understand their total bond election is going to be for about $400 million. We're suggesting that we submit at least that $20 million worth, assuming we can get our material all together and ready to submit it, and then see what they in fact will approve to go into the bond election. Anything that doesn't make it, we'll fall back then and start looking at how that's prioritized with our $14 million that we can issue of COs. So hopefully I didn't muddy the water, but it's important that we begin to get some direction as soon as possible on the fire truck and the ambulance, using the first $1 million of that $6 million issue, and then what projects you want us to submit to the county. We've got some time to put together the total bond election if you decide you want to go forward with it for a public safety facility or any other projects at the local level.
George, if we submit $20 million to the county and they come back and say, we're gonna give it all to you, do we get kind of a first right of refusal to go, well, we were hoping for all of it, but we didn't really think that? Do we get to come back and go, not this one, but we'll take the rest of them?
Well, I think obviously, Chad, we're going to work with the county and determine whether or not, if the county approved a project, for instance, and it's 50% funding, that they would approve. But if Commissioner Allen were to say, I'll supplement that with some of my 15 million, I mean, we don't know today how much of that money we'd have to come up with locally, but generally we know it'd be 50% of the projects that are submitted under the call for projects category. And it doesn't, the commissioner's allocation isn't limited to a 50% match. So we'd be working with them over the coming months. The real question tonight is, are those 4 projects that we listed and recommended ones that sound reasonable to the council to move forward and us begin doing the work to get the diagrams, the schematics, the cost estimates refined in order to get them submitted in April to the county? Or would you rather pull one of those off and include a different project that's on that project list? Would you want to remove the Valley Lane erosion project and put Trent Street or something in there. We've tried to evaluate on a basis of priority, which ones we think would be best. Now, we won't know until August which ones the county's even going to include in their project list. And then if it gets included, we're not going to know until a November election whether it gets funded by the voters or not. So part of our decision is, what can we delay that long? And are there some projects on that list of 14 million that we just think we need to move forward now and not even try to get it on the county's list? So that was part of our evaluation.
Larry,
George.
is your, oh, go ahead, Josh.
I was just gonna say, can we have another workshop, or do you want us to just email you with what projects we want to see, don't want to see? And
Yeah, we can do it, Josh, any way you want. Again, I'm looking right now, the county, we got the letter from the county on January the 28th that they'd made the decision and they're asking for the call for projects. We've got until April 16th to submit everything to them. So I'd like to get a response as soon as we can. Some of the information we're already working on those projects that we identified. But we can have any number of work sessions that you want, or you can take that entire project list, go through it and see if you think something should take a higher priority. And Larry and I and Lakita would be happy to meet with any of you individually if you need further explanation on detail on those projects, because it's been several months, obviously, since we went over it in detail with you. And Gary, unfortunately, you weren't on the council then, so this is all new to you and we understand that.
Yeah.
the other question I have is, do you want direction on this fire truck and ambulance tonight?
Not necessarily, but we do need to know whether or not we're on that list of projects to fund out of the $14 million. If you say that's still a priority, as you had indicated before, then we are in fact working to draw up the specifications. The fire department has been to one of the plants to look at the quality of the product that we might be acquiring. We are having substantial problems, particularly with our ambulances and spending a lot of money on them. So, it's my opinion that we need to commit to that so that if we need to place an order, council's in a position that you're ready to commit that first $1 million of that debt. So as soon as you can give us that go ahead.
Yeah. Can I ask Chief a question real quick? Chief Brown, do you know off the top of your head how much maintenance we've spent on both the ambulance and the fire truck? Not only this month, but this year?
This budget year, our frontline ambulance, I've spent just short of $9,000 on it in the last 4 weeks. Our frontline fire truck, we blew a head gasket a month and a half ago. That was over $6,000 on that one. It's still got a issue associated with it that we're trying to work out with our mechanics. So far, I've probably spent just short of $20,000 this year on routine maintenance.
And how old are both of those?
The frontline engine is 10 years old. The frontline ambulance is 10 years old. Our reserve equipment, our reserve fire truck is 21 years old. Our backup ambulance is 15 years old.
Okay. And
we look at, ideally we look at replacing an ambulance every 5 years. So an ambulance would have a 5-year frontline status and then be in reserve status for 5 years. Engines are 10 years frontline and 10 years in the reserve status. So we're a little behind on the ambulances. We're pretty close on the engines.
And I can vouch for that because we replace our engines here every 10 years, ladder trucks every 15, 20 years, and ambulances every 5 years. So,
And Josh, and council, if the council, and again, I think those are two very high priorities for the first issuance of the COs. And if in fact we proceeded and placed the orders for those two pieces of equipment, then we begin to reprioritize and determine what are the greatest priorities left on that list of projects for the $14 million. But it would alter that list some because those items aren't on it right now.
I have a question. Let's say that we move forward with this. Is there any value in the old fire truck? We would be getting rid of something, or would we be keeping it as a backline? How would that work? So in other words, if you got a new one.
So the reserve truck, like I said, it's right at 21 years old. We would try and sell it. The market for a 21-year-old fire truck is not very large. If we're, in experience of other departments that have got rid of them, they may have a value of $20,000.
Okay.
But essentially we'd move, James, correct me if I'm wrong, we'd move the current frontline ambulance and fire truck into the reserve status and replace them on frontline with the new equipment.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay.
And again, I know that the mayor's not here, and if we can come back at the meeting in March, or if you all are interested in a separate special meeting to have a work session, talk about more detail after you've had a chance to look at these spreadsheets on the projects, we could do that. Again, I'm just looking for some direction as quickly as possible on the ambulance and the fire truck and on which projects to submit to the county so we can spend our resources getting those projects ready.
I definitely need to come down and meet with you guys because I don't even know what the projects are. So I definitely need to come down and just be brought up to speed on exactly what the reasoning is behind it and what's going to happen, how it's going to work. So, yeah.
Well, we can try to set something, Gary, up with you about that maybe next week and get
Yes,
Larry and I and Lakita in the room, and we can go through that list that the rest of the council's seen a couple of times.
Okay.
And we do the same thing with any of you who want to do that.
I'm gonna say, I'm in favor of the ambulance and fire truck. I just know if that goes down, the added response time to get help from a neighboring city isn't seconds, it's minutes, and minutes count. So.
I mean, if we all agree right now that it's important to have a fire truck and ambulance, can we move with that tonight if everybody's in agreement?
Well, there's no action item on your agenda.
I know it's not
Russ,
action,
but
to give you
I don't
direction.
need that. What I need is a consensus that you're still in agreement that that's your
Right.
priority. It hasn't changed since we talked about this during the budget.
That's definitely my priority.
That's mine as well.
Mine too. Yeah.
For the fire and ambulance, yes. There were a few changes back in March when this was presented to us that I brought up, and one of them being the Collette Sublet Road, the construction cost, because on the original one, it said it would be funded out of a GO. But now that I've seen the presentation today, I see where it was moved to the county list for the county bond for the construction cost of that. I guess my question on that would be, let's say that the county bond election, everything gets approved, and like Chad said earlier, all of our items were approved that we had put on whatever the list is going to contain that we submit. And then we have a GO election and it's not approved. What do we do?
Well,
Yeah.
Linda, if we submit the Collette Sublet Road, for instance, to the county and say, we'd like you to fund this, then in August, we wouldn't do anything on that roadway until we find out whether the county is going to include it or not. If it's included and approved, then we would not obviously have that on a city bond election at the same time, unless you wanted to put money on there for streets and roads and we needed some of that local bond money to pay our local match with the county. That's possible. But if in fact the county were going to fund that, we'd need to match our 50% share. But we wouldn't be funding all of it with local debt. Now, if the county tells us in August, that didn't make the cut, we're not going to do that, then we'll move ahead with it and consider it on a local bond election. Or you could consider it on the local bond election. But you're
Yeah,
going to be needing to call that local bond election about the same time the county's calling theirs.
I think that was one of the reasons why I was wanting Collette Sublet to be switched with one of, I think it was the design engineering for the Linda Road to New Hope Road. That one shows to be out of the CO, and I would rather see the Collette Sublet, my opinion, out of the CO. That way, it's assured to be done, because bond elections, you never know. And, with everybody tied on their finances right now because of COVID and losing their jobs and already kind of screaming about a high tax rate, I just don't know how that's going to go over with our
I think
taxpayers.
that's a very legitimate issue, and Larry, correct me, but I think we have the design of Collette Sublet done, do we not?
Yes, we do.
Mine is done. All we need is funding for the
So-
construction.
So if in fact the council's preference is, we've got the engineering design done, move ahead with it with some of that $6 million issue and start it now and don't worry about putting it on any bond election. Just
I agree with Linda on that
give it a
one.
priority. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
that's the kind of discussion we're looking for and input from the council as to how to proceed.
Okay. That's all.
Sounds like we all have homework.
Well, if you all want to do that, we'll set up a meeting with Gary at least next week if we can, and then go over some more detail. And then with any of the rest of you, Mr. Mayor, that you would want, just get in touch with us. And then if any of you think we should have another work session before the March meeting, again, I'm a little concerned that if we're not ready to pull the trigger to make a decision to give us some direction on the county bond election until the regular meeting in March, we're going to need a resolution at that point. So if you want to meet before that to refine this, we can do that.
I think that's probably the best option is everybody do your homework, figure out what your pick list is. Ask your, Gary, go down there, ask your questions, see what it is. And then we all come back together at a special meeting to put those lists together, see where we match, debate what didn't match and figure out that list so that on our regular meeting on March, we have a list to move forward on.
Hey, Gary,
Yes, sir.
whenever you go down there and meet, can I come with you?
Sure.
All right.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I like to sit down and kind of review it again. So I'd appreciate if I could do that.
That'd be great. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, if we have other questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Does anybody else have anything else? All right. Is there anything else you have on the list for us, George?
No, I think we covered the rest of the agenda. We took this last, so
All
we
right.
don't have anything else, I don't think.
Well, that being said, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, please.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Miss Leslie, would you please call the roll?
Josh Altum,
Okay.
Gary Mitchell,
Yay.
Linda Rhodes,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wendell.
Affirmative. Everyone stay safe. Look after your neighbors, and until our next meeting, we'll see you then.
Thank you all.
Bye.